continuing with the issue of the seals, trumpets, and bowl judgments. This is going to be much faster than the seals. It's actually about 10 times or better more interesting. So let's kind of start, and again, I'm going to do both the trumpets and the bowls in this video. There's some that I'm not going to deal with because I don't really have any additional insight to them. So, and when I say additional insight, realize that if I've got it right, it's from the creator, and if I don't, it's because of me. I'm trying to put something there. So, unlike the seals, most of these things are great because they'll blow and come into things for the future. So we don't have to worry about anything for the anima side because these will all be after the anima side. So much easier to deal with. Let's start with the first trumpet is Revelation 8:7. The first angel sounded his trumpet, and there came hail and fire mixed with blood, and it was hurled down on the earth. A third of the earth was burned up, a third of the trees were burned up, and all the green grass was burned up. Now, there's some interesting things in that. One, the grass being burned up. Grass recovers extremely quickly from fire, so it's not, the grass doesn't really worry about it. Now, if, however, you are a person that is harvesting grass, specifically a barley or wheat, you know, those are grasses, oats, whatever. If they catch on fire, you've lost the actual product. But the grass is still fine, it'll grow. I just finished mowing my yard and it's 3,000 degrees out here today. I almost wish it was on fire. And if it gets about 6 degrees hotter, it probably will catch on fire. Now, the bigger issue from the first trumpet is trees, though. Why? Because trees provide oxygen, and it takes a lot longer for a tree to recover. In other words, you got to grow a new tree, and that takes decades. So when the trees are destroyed, that starts potentially having an issue that could change the atmosphere, changing the oxygen or carbon dioxide content in the atmosphere. Now, is that a bad thing? No. Why? Because these are curses, and those of us in faith know that all curses are a blessing. So it may be doing that because he's going to reduce the human population, and we won't need as many trees to compensate. I'm sure he's got this all worked out before he even created the earth. He had this all worked out of, this is the type of atmosphere I want to give them for the millennial reign. So it's not an issue. It's going to be a benefit. No matter what it is, it will be a benefit. But just kind of want to point that out there. It could change the atmosphere a little bit. Second trumpet. The second angel, which is Revelation 8:8. Second angel sounded his trumpet, and something like a huge mountain, all ablaze, was thrown into the sea. A third of the sea turned into blood. A third of the living creatures in the sea died, and a third of the ships were destroyed. Now this is one that gets really interesting. And I look at it because it's being something about the size of a mountain being thrown into the sea. To me, that sounds like either an asteroid or a meteor striking. Now, the fact it says it was thrown into the sea gives another indication of what is going to happen with it. Notice that it did not say, when it said 1/3 of the sea turns to blood, it didn't say that the animals died because of that issue. In other words, when 1/3 of the fish die, it's not solely because of that, if any of that even has a bearing on it. But it will have a bearing mathematically or scientifically. The first question we have is, where is this going to strike? And I think we have enough clues to get a very good idea of where it's going to strike. And the reason for that is because 1/3 of the ships and 1/3 of the fish sounds to me like it's Pacific Ocean. And 1/3 of all ships on Earth are actually owned by 4 countries: Taiwan, China, Japan, and I think it's Korea. Not North Korea, just Korea. Or we'd say South Korea. That's 1/3, 15,820 of the merchant ships. So again, those are the larger ships. Now, again, the fact it's fully ablaze also kind of gives you more of indication that this is an asteroid or a comet coming through the atmosphere. When they come in, they're coming in extremely fast. You know, we've all seen the movies. We've all seen these things, and as they come in, they're always on fire. So, to me, that's validating that that is what it is. The fact it's able to destroy that many ships and that many fish is also a validation that it, you know, somebody may say, well, it could be a nuclear weapon. Nuclear weapons aren't that strong. Not to do that type of damage. Now, the reality is, I think the fish are all going to die from shockwave. You know, anybody who's been around rednecks know you throw a little bit of dynamite or a hand grenade in the water, it explodes the fish. It busts the bladder of the fish. Some of them will float to the top, and you know you're done. So it's real quick and easy. Sound travels faster in water, which is why this stuff happens. Faster in water than in air. If an asteroid strikes the water, now they've done a scientific study on this, and they did a scientific study with something the equivalent of 2/3 of a mile in diameter. And if it struck, what type of power would it strike with? If it's 2/3 of a mile, when it comes in, it will actually vaporize the ocean for 11 miles in diameter around it. So that water basically goes to steam immediately. And of course, when you have that type of a hole, it's got to fill in. Of course, the meteor's still striking the Earth at the bottom, the crust, which is probably, if you're dealing with the Pacific Ocean, about 3 miles deep. It's still got to hit that crust. And that creates some issues, and I'll get to those. But then the water that is now out for 11 miles has to come back in, and that creates a tsunami, tidal wave. And the math shows it's going to be a tidal wave about 400 feet or 400 meters tall, which again is a huge issue, whether it's 400 feet or 400 feet tall. That would be catastrophic for any island nation around there, whether you're in Indonesia, Philippines, Japan, China, west coast of America, and the eastern portion of Australia. They would all get hit with a tsunami that high. The next question is, again, we've got the water that's vaporized. How much force does it actually strike with? And again, they did the math at a 2/3 mile diameter asteroid striking. And this says a mountain. So a mountain most likely is larger than this. But they came up with 60,000 megatons. Now let's put that in comparison. The bomb on Hiroshima was 15 kilotons, not megatons, kilotons. All the bombs in World War II combined were 3 megatons. This is 60,000 megatons. After World War II, we got into an arms race between Russia and the United States, and everybody was trying to make the bigger and bigger atomic bomb. And the largest of all of them was the Tsar bomb, which had the equivalent power of 15 megatons, which is 5 times greater than every single bomb used in World War II. 15 compared to 60,000, which one is much larger than the other. That's why you can lose that many ships. You know, if you're a ship and you're in port, it's over. If you're a ship and you're in the water, most likely it's over as well. Again, a shock wave from something that large, you can imagine there would be no fish in the Pacific Ocean. They would all be, every fish would be ruptured. So does it fit? I believe it does. But there's another interesting factor they found when they were looking at whether a meteor striking the water. And where's that here? And finding was by the American Geophysical Union lead author Devon Parkos. When it strikes the water, basically it doesn't even hit the water because the water for the most part evaporates, just turns to steam immediately. It then hits the crust and creates an explosion which sends fragments back into the atmosphere, which then fall back to Earth. These fragments create silica glass and nitrous oxide. And the nitrous oxide creates a deadly algae bloom, which then can kill fish and marine life. Of course, it's immaterial at that point in time because the shock wave would have killed everything there for where these things would fall. The usual term for the red algae bloom is red tide. So it's going to look like blood. So again, it's interesting. Could be, might not be. We'll find out. So let's, again, the second trumpet. Let's look at the third trumpet. And this is, again, one of the reasons why I think the second trumpet is there, because this one, you can almost guarantee, is an asteroid striking. This is Revelation 8:10. And so if one strikes, I wouldn't doubt that one other asteroid is right behind it. Revelation 8:10, the third angel sounded his trumpet, and a great star, blazing like a torch, again sounding just like an asteroid coming down, fell from the sky on a third of the rivers and on the springs of water. The name of the star is Wormwood. A third of the waters turned bitter, and many people died from the waters that had become bitter. Now, we have the term bitter being used a number of times, but let's look at some clues. We've got some clues that are in Jeremiah 9 and 23. Jeremiah 9 is dealing with the corruption of Israel, and so this is not us. Okay, it's not something in the future, but I just want to pull something out of there. He indicates that Elohim will make them drink bitter water, verse 15, and scatter them throughout the nations, verse 16. So obviously that's the northern kingdom. But again, as they come out, he made them drink bitter water. Jeremiah 23 is about the return to the kingdom, so this is more of us. Chapter starts with a warning of woe to pastors who destroy and scatter the sheep. And in verse 15, he says he will feed them, the corrupt pastors, wormwood. So that should be an interesting factor. Secondly, in addition to that, when they did the first Exodus, when they crossed the Red Sea, the first place they got water was Marah, and it was bitter water. My opinion is that's probably because a lot of them were unrighteous at that point in time, so he made them drink a little bitter water. Just something to think about. I'm not saying I'm right. It's just something I think about. Now, going back to wormwood, because this is where the fun parts comes in. Because we know it's bitter, it gives us a great clue, because bitter, you can do that from iron and manganese. It will turn the water bitter. And there is a specific class of asteroids that contains iron and manganese, and it is a type S asteroid, which is 70% of all the asteroids are type S asteroids. So it already has that ability to create and make the water bitter. Maybe something else that does it. Maybe it's a nuclear missile on this one. This is much more likely that it could be a nuclear as to an asteroid. The second trumpet, I don't think there's any chance that one's a nuclear weapon, because there's no nuclear weapon that powerful. It's going to take something, at least 10,000 megatons to do that kind of damage, and we don't have that. Whereas asteroids exist, they can hit, they're easy. This one, I think we've got a good idea, and by good I'm saying maybe a 50-50 chance of where it's going to hit. And I would put the odds on that over Europe. Africa has the Nile, and it has some other rivers, but it doesn't have that many rivers. South America, for the most part, is the Amazon. Obviously, it's got other rivers, obviously through Argentina, Uruguay. It's got other rivers, but they're not major ones. United States has a lot of rivers. And I'm not going to say, oh, it's just the Ohio and Mississippi. It's got a lot of rivers for the United States. Europe has a ton of them. And so to me, if it's going to hit, I would think Europe. Again, not saying I'm right, I'm just saying if I would put about 50-50, which is better than saying it's 20% likely. So I would put, and I'd probably even say 51%. I would think the odds are slightly in favor of striking Europe. Now, striking Europe, if it's going to be spread over the rivers, that tells me that it actually explodes in the air. And that way, the iron and manganese can actually spread out to a much greater extent and get to the water. Which again, if the asteroid has water in it, when it comes through and it starts burning up in the atmosphere, it heats everything up. And water, when it turns to steam, steam has a volume of 16,000, not 16,000, 1,600 times that of water. So that's why steam explosions are pretty big. So I could see that happening in an instant. You know, you turn that stuff, that asteroid, if it has water in it and you turn it to steam, it's going to boom and it's going to be everywhere. I'm not going to deal with that part of it. All right, so let's deal with then the next one, which will be the fourth trumpet. Revelation 8:12, the fourth angel sounded his trumpet, and a third of the sun was struck, and a third of the moon, and a third of the stars, so that a third of them turned dark. A third of the day was without light, and also a third of the night. That's another really interesting issue. Realize that 70% of our atmosphere is already clouds. So if he's striking a third of everything, is he, because 70% is already covered, so in other words, is he going to take 10%, put more, if you put 10%, the 30% that is getting through, that is 1/3 of it. It doesn't take that much to get up to 1/3, but that doesn't mean that's what he's dealing with. Sunshine produces 429.7 BTUs per square feet. Losing a third of this would be 300.8 BTUs per square feet that still come to Earth. That is a drastic change. Obviously, it would change things in farming, cool down the Earth tremendously. But we don't know how this is going to play itself out. This could easily be the fallout from those two asteroids striking. And in fact, I would almost guarantee it would be, because they will have residue in the atmosphere at that point in time. And you know, you've got one on each side. One's in the Pacific, and one's more than likely in Europe. And so those things are just putting ash throughout the atmosphere. It's going to cut back on the amount of light. And I don't want to get into all that, but I started dealing with radiation, which part of the country has what amount of radiation. I don't think we need to get to that for the purposes of this. From there, we'll go to the fifth angel, fifth trumpet, which is Revelation 9:1-11, locusts from the pit. I'm going to be very brief on this. One, can we eat them? Locusts are food. It's a clean food. The fact that it comes from the pit doesn't change the fact it's a clean food. The Creator has said we can eat locusts. So can we eat them? They're there to torment those who have the mark of the beast. If we are on the Exodus, we don't have the mark of the beast. So instead of looking at them as a curse, we may look at them as free food. Just something to think about. Now, there's another interesting thing, but it doesn't apply here, and that was Amos 7:1. And the Creator was saying to Amos, And this was to Israel before they were thrown out of the land. This is northern kingdoms, and he was basically saying, this is what I'm going to do. And Amos was saying, no, please, Lord, no, they're too small. You'll wipe them out. And he goes, okay, I won't do that. But in Amos 7:1, he timed that to the locust to the late crop. Now, he said he wouldn't do it then. By extension, does that mean he won't do it now? Is that giving us a timing of when those will occur? We don't know. It's just something to think about that may play into it. I'm not saying it will, just something that is out there as you start researching through things. Again, there are at least 2 living creatures in the abyss or the pit, and they are Leviathan, which is in Job, and the locust here. So, just another interesting thing. So, from there we'll go to the 6th, which 6th trumpet is Revelation 9:14. Release the angels, 4 angels who are bound at the great river Euphrates, and the 4 angels who have been kept ready for this very hour and day and month and year were released to kill 1/3 of mankind. I believe, and I know a number of others who believe, that this is nuclear war. I know Monty Judah believes this is nuclear war. Because doing all this within an hour, what's able to kill 1/3 of mankind in an hour? I see that as nuclear weapons. So we'll see. Not saying it is, just that's something I see. So for the 7th trumpet, Revelation 11:19. Then God's temple in heaven was opened, and within his temple was seen the Ark of the Covenant, and there came flashes of lightning, rumblings, pearls of thunder, an earthquake, and a severe hailstorm. Usually when we see heavenly hail, it's on fire. But there's more to it than just that. And that's because in Job, that hail has been stored up and it's waiting for a certain time. And that's an interesting thing to play through. You know, he's kept a storehouse for these things to be used. So with that, we're going to go and rather quickly through the bowl judgments, because most of them are just kind of very straightforward, so I'm not going to deal with most of them. But we do know, and the last 3 things I mentioned in the trumpets were not just the trumpets, they were woes. So locust was a woe. What did I just say what the 6th was? Nuclear war is a woe, assuming it's nuclear war. But 1/3 is destroyed. And earthquake and pearls of thunder, rumblings, lightning, and severe hailstorm is also a woe. So it's not a small thing. If it's identifying it as a woe, that should be a real factor that this is severe. And if all that wasn't bad enough, then we come to the bowls. Now the bowls are described in Revelation 16:1 as God's wrath. So these things are where it's big. Now, the other thing that happens just before the wrath is the timing. And the timing is going to be in Revelation 14:13. Blessed are those who now on, who die in the name of the Lord and now on, because now the trumpets have left. So if you're going to be beheaded for refusing the mark of the beast and being the first resurrection, you have to actually survive the trumpets to do so. So that's a little bit of a rough thing. There's a penalty for not going on the Exodus. You have to now sit through that. But at this point in time, from that point forward, from Revelation 14:13, if they pass and are beheaded for the right reason, for refusing the mark of the beast, they get in the first resurrection. So let's look at some of those. And again, I'm going to skip through almost all of them because they're rather evident in what they say and what they're dealing with. Revelation 16:12, which is the sixth bowl judgment, which is drying up the river Euphrates. And its water was dried up to prepare the way for the kings of the east. That's us. That's those of us on Exodus. At that point in time, we would be over closer to Babylon, and that's when we're returning for Armageddon, which then we get to Revelation 16:21, which is dealing with the final bowl. And the only reason I wanted to bring this up is because of weight. Now we know that from Ezekiel 48, we need to go back to the original weights and measures. We will not be using pounds and kilos or any of that stuff. So indications of what we think of as money are actually amounts of weight. So a gerah is an amount of weight. The half shekel, the shekel, the mina, the talent, these things are factors of weight. Now, we just heard Revelation 16:21 that the weight of these hailstones are going to be a talent. I've heard so many different variations of what a talent is. Well, he gives us that answer if we can figure, again, you can start from a point and find out what the weight of a talent is. It just takes a little bit of work. A gerah is 1/20th of a sanctuary shekel. We know the weight of a gerah, which is 0.57 grams, which in today's money is about 31 cents. A half a shekel, which is 10 gerahs, weighs 5.7 grams. A shekel, which is 20 gerahs, weighs 11.4 grams. A mina, which we get from Ezekiel 45:12, is 60 shekels, and that is 684 grams. And a talent, which we get from Exodus 38:25, is 3,000 shekels, which is 1,206 ounces, which is 75.39 pounds, or 34.2 kilos, if you want to play it that way. So now we know what the actual weight of this hailstone is. Now the largest hailstone that's ever struck the earth so far that we know of is right at 2 pounds, and it's the size. I mean, it's bigger than my hand, which my hand's pretty good, but that's a big hailstone. That's 2 pounds. Think of 75 pounds. Now, because I love geek stuff, I wouldn't just stop with that. So if we give them a rough surface area, because hailstones are rough, we can assume a terminal velocity of this hail to be about 49 meters a second, which is 109 miles per hour. See, I told you I wouldn't just stop with a small geek. This is going to strike with 1,675.8 newtons of force, or 375 foot-pounds of force. Let's put that in comparison and try to figure out some stuff. A .308 bullet fired from a gun is, the bullet is 6.3 grams and will strike with 5.4 newtons of force, or 1.133 foot-pounds of force. So the hail is going to strike with 310 times more force than a .308 bullet. 300 times more force than that. So anything it strikes, if it's human, if it is what we would have a car or something like that, it's gone. I mean, there's nothing that's going to survive that. And if that weren't bad enough, it's also on fire. Can a tank survive that? I believe a tank could survive that type of an impact. But you would almost have to get to tank level to survive that impact. Which we could think, oh, wow, that means they're going to have tanks against us. Well, who cares? We got the creator of the universe on our side. What good is a tank versus the creator of the universe? At that battle of Armageddon, their eyes are melting out of their eye sockets. Their tongues doing all kinds of crazy stuff. So who cares that they're in a tank? The creator has this all taken care of. We just do what we're told to do. And again, I told you that it was to be a fast one, and again, I find that a little bit more interesting than the other. So I'll leave it there.